album does John Wesley Harding. He's the one who comes back from Blonde on Blonde, Motorcycle Act, and he just has this really simple, straightforward record. Not a lot of electric instruments.
Back to the earth, John.
Right, and that I think that is the real spark that turns this around. Right, so the Beatles kind of get out the last couple psychedelic things with Magical Mystery Tour, and then they move on to I guess Lady Madonna is the next single after that. Right, Lady Madonna, and then Hey Jude, Revolution, and then so it's not just all of a sudden the White Album comes out of nowhere. You got Stones go back to Jumpin' Jack Flash, like it's like the Stones haven't had a real hit song, in a long period of time then, which was probably 6 months or 8 months or whatever.
That's incredible.
And they come back with Jumpin' Jack Flash. And, so it's like everyone kind of goes back to their roots, including, I don't know if you call it the Beatles roots, but they strip it down,
But it's like minimalism, nothing on the album, everything's plain visually. And then also, there's minimal overdubbing or minimal that's produced in a different way as opposed to those previous two records.
They record a lot of the first record produced in stereo. Thank you very much. That's and the Beatles cared about it.
There is an actual, because there is a mono mix. It's the last one that had a mono mix.
Correct.
But it was
the Beatles
stereo was the primary.
about the stereo mix, and first off, the Beatles only cared about the mono mix, and when they did this, when they all made sure like all of them were in there, and it was a listening thing, and talked about the stereo mix. It was a big deal for the very first time. Before
first band,
I think it's a good.
Are they the first band ever, or is it just first Beatles stereo? No. Okay,
first Beatles.
Gotcha.
But Chuck Berry made stereo.
But the other ones came out in stereo, right, John? Like it's not like they weren't. Like you could get a mono or a stereo mix. It's just that the Beatles didn't care so much about that. Like
they sold a lot more mono. A lot of people didn't have stereos, but the Beatles, my understanding,
most especially, Britain still had a lot of mono hi-fi stuff.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. But they would, most kids had the, there's the hi-fi stuff too. But my understanding is the Beatles would be involved with mono mix, and then the engineers would go off and knock out a stereo one because they needed one for the stereo market for the high fidelity, and they didn't sell a lot of those.
That's the way I understand it as well.
And that, and to Chris's point, the White Album was that's when everything became much more commonly stereo, and that was what they considered the primary one. And John has famously said, he's like, you haven't heard Pepper until you heard it in the mono mix. That's the one we made, whereas the stereo one, it's and it's been refuted that they weren't engaged at all with the stereo or whatever. But that's where I do find the problem is most people don't even know the mono mixes, right? The record company, the one that if you bought the CD and whatever, it's the stereo one. So it was funny because we were earlier I'd sent you guys the Ray Davies 1966 review of Revolver track by track. So I went to go listen to it, and I'm like, that's right, I got Taxman, I got the vocals double tracked in one ear, and it's just kind of like, damn, there's those couple of years of stereo mixes that are just so annoying because they're so separated. They're not done in a cool way. They're just done in a vocals here, drums there kind of thing. But the mono ones sound great. I have one of those half-speed masters of Rubber Soul, and it's the stereo one. It's kind of annoying. It's like drive my car, all the music's down one end of my room, and the vocals are on another. It's annoying.
Do you think that was a limitation of the technology, or of they weren't used to the technology to mix? Their ears weren't in tune to wouldn't it? It's stereo,
but it wasn't. It would be it'd be the equivalent of we're going to do a quadraphonic mix or a 5.1 mix of something. It's just that's a specialty market. It's not the common mix.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's what I meant by that.
Singles are never in stereo.
Right.
Singles are always mono because they're radio.
Playing on a jukebox of some kind, or right?
Jukebox actually could be in stereo, but the 45s. Well into the 70s are all mono.
Right.
And sometimes you get a mono on one side and a stereo on the other, the same song.
Oh, I imagine the market being, oh yeah, it's kids with those little turntables we talked about, those little suitcase style with a speaker built in, and that's the market for these 45s.
Like even in the late 60s, it was like the Playboy Advisor guys. You know?
Right, yeah.
Hey, yeah, I got my hi-fi, baby. Want to come and listen? You know, I got a nice silk robe and
right,
and some,
for the stereo market. But I'm saying,
cologne.
like, you can imagine that there's like the audience. Well, we got to get it out for the kids, you know, and the kids are there. There's that market that you talked about. That would be the Playboy gentleman's high fidelity. But then there's like, oh, the kids, the teenagers.
Do you think they really thought that hard about it, John? Like as far as I think they try to make it sound as good as possible for, you know, I don't know what market, like ultimately, but like that kind of suitcase style turntable, like, were they really thinking about that the way Les Paul thought about sound? I don't know.
No,
all I could think of is, remember, there was a lot of times you'll find that message. It's like, this stereo record will play, you know, can play on your monaural system as well. Like don't be like when they got frustrated of like, now we got to make two of these, you know, and I think that was kind of part of it. But at the end of the day, it was just like they had to make VHS and Beta. You know, and they sold a shitload of VHS.
Again,
but Beta was better.
Right,
know?
That's what I'm comparing it to. So you probably have the equivalent of your black and white TV audience, and we got to bring. There's this new thing out there that's color. We got to get out, and it's like everybody's household owns a black and white, but you know the color TV is newer and it's more money, and we want to get people to start buying those. So you got to start putting stuff out in this new format, and in the beginning, it's always. The majority of your market is taking the lesser format, and that's who we're gearing. But there's the upper population
but to your point, the Beatles were making the mono record, right? And it was just like, oh, and at some point they got more engaged with it, but it was like,
right.
It's like, oh yeah, you're gonna do stereo mix. That's
right, because
cool.
that's a much smaller market, and it's for this high end client. You know, theoretically, it's for this high. Right. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
There's a funny clip in The Kids Are All Right where Pete Townsend is talking about, like, as though it's like, he's like, I was just listening today to a Beatles record in stereo, you know where all the instruments are in one track and the vocals in the other, and you know, you take away the vocals, you know, and they're quite lousy. Right. And it's like, and that's like kind of the clip in the movie, but it's that same thing where it's like he has to explain people what stereo is. And this is like 66, you know.
What a dick, though. Like, is it like it's Pete Townsend? Yeah, I don't know. Like, you don't get to say that. Even if you're Pete Townsend.
But you read the Ray Davies review where he's talking about, like, there's like 3 good songs on it, and one of them rips me off, you know.
It's why, like, when I read it, I was just like, it's great because it is what it is. On the other hand, is it some sort of insightful? No, it's a little bit more. Well, it's interesting to hear what Ray Davies has to say about it, you know, but is it, you know, like you said, he pretty much rips it. Like Taxman, he doesn't like it. You know, Eleanor Rigby, he doesn't like it.
Eleanor Rigby. Oh, you know, John wrote that for his music teacher. You know, it's like
it's a Paul song, but right. But like he likes. But I was saying, right. Did he say that? Did he say?
Yes, he does that. He's like, oh, I'm sure John wrote it because he wanted to say something nice about his music mistress or something like that. Like he referred to that his like music teacher was this woman that he was trying to impress. Yeah.
But don't you think guys like that are taking their pot shots at them because they're like the easy target of like, why are they always getting the publicity and why are they getting when we're just as good and we're a better band and we write songs, right?
Because Ray Davies is always factored into the. It's impossible to deny who's the best songwriter out of like British Invasion Britain, and Ray Davies, like, and John Lennon are like they're right there. You know, John Lennon, of course. Sorry, but like, you know, Ray Davies.
That's what I mean. It sucks.
Right.
You know, it sucks to be number 2 because you came out with this other band. You know, it's
I'm sure
a different period.
It was trying hard to be Jagger and Richards, but the fact is, like the Kinks, like Ray Davies wrote better songs. I said
Kinks are awesome, yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, I'm just saying it, but it's like, so in their mind, their frustration must be like, why we're writing just as good stuff, or we did this first, or we've been doing.
In particular, he goes after George's Indian influence song on it. What's the title on that on Revolver? I'm blanking.
Love You Too?
Yes. Love You Too. And he's like, and so now it looks like George has a big influence on the band. You know, he's doing songs like, you know, now I'm copying the Beatles 2 years ago.
The Kinks fans have always pointed to something, and I can't think of what it is, but they've always pointed to something that came out before.
See My Friend.
Norwegian
My
Wood.
Friend.
Right. Comes out before Norwegian Wood, even.
Exactly.
And then George, they say George saw it, heard it, whatever, and went out and got the sitar. And it was like less to do with Indian influence and more to do with he saw the Kinks that week.
Well, Ray's wife was of Indian descent, and she sings harmonies on most of their singles. Like it's like
right. What's her first name again?
Raza.
Right. Yeah. Like right. Yeah. I've heard about that. Yeah.
I didn't know she was singing on
She was a primary. Yeah.
Yeah. She's like she does a lot of harmonies. Yeah. It's Dave and her. Yeah. I
want to just go off on a completely different tangent because I just thought about it, and I'm meaning to ask you, John. So, why is it? Why is it that the band that or the guy who wrote Dazed and Confused never came out earlier? Why didn't any of those people come out earlier against Led Zeppelin and say, "Well, that's my song that he took"? Why do you think it took so long?
Because I actually think Led Zeppelin kind of pushed the limit, but people borrow stuff all the time. But that
Dazed and Confused is such a blatant
the song
take.
I know.
And he was apparently playing with the bow, right? The guy was using the guy was using the bow and everything.
Like Whole Lot of Love is worse too. It's like Willie Dixon, like on Chess Records, and it's like the same song, just with an electric. You know what I mean? It's like
Muddy Waters. But I could see that being like, okay, that's for a black market, and most white kids aren't going to know about it. And
you can get away with it.
Well, that's their thinking that it's like, it's just like what you just said. We do this all the time. But I imagine the guy who, and I don't know his name, you may know it, the guy who wrote Dazed and Confused is like he was a guy playing.
He wrote Dazed and Confused, and then the Yardbirds covered it as I'm Confused. We changed the lyrics a little, and so.
But the guy had to know, right? I mean, the guy had to be somebody playing. He was in the clubs playing, and they were like, they had him open up or something.
You're having. I think you're having a very. Like last 20, 30 years kind of point of view on it. I think it was like, think about how many songs sound just like, either the You Really Got Me riff, which is kind of, Louie Louie, which is, for example, Keith Richards didn't want to record Satisfaction because he thought the riff was the din 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 from Dancing in the Streets. Din 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 din. Like it's like he's just like it's just me playing the Dancing in the Streets riff on one string.
Yeah, but he slows the tempo down. He changed like all the examples that so far that have come up. There is a difference when you hear those two versions. It is a copy. He's covering that song.
Yeah.
And why did they ever just give him credit, or why didn't that guy bring up the lawsuit or bring that up?
Jimmy Page was like apparently it was fairly frequent. Like he would like this like because remember also the rest of Led Zeppelin didn't know, right? Like he right. It's like they didn't have that guy opening for the Yardbirds, But that's the thing is the guy was like, sure. The fact that Jimmy Page didn't go like, "Hey, dude, we're gonna cover your song," that's on Jimmy Page,
right? But I bring it up more towards the the artist that wrote the song, that when Zeppelin was huge in like 71, 72, and those albums were selling by the millions, how did he not say, like, or get a lawyer or some or management and say, that is my song? He's